Good morning, everyone. Today's video is going to be about the 5A content for the grammar chapter, but first, our weekly sloth. Looks like maybe he's having a little snack here, which is very cute. So, for our grammar content, we first need to discuss the historical infinitive. So the historical infinitive is a way to use a series of infinitives in a passage, and they are the main verb of the sentence. So each one is basically equivalent to an imperfect verb, but it's just a series of infinitives with no main verb. They're not relying on anything, they're acting on their own. Alright, so a good example of the historical infinitive is the one they have in your book. So here you can see it's just a series of infinitives. There's no main verb in the sentence, and these are setting up a sequence of actions. So things that are probably in the imperfect because they're just happening all at the same time constantly. So Catiline at Rome, locative there. Many things, multa, at the same time, simul, agra. He was doing. So he's doing many things at the same time. He was collocare insidias, so he was setting up ambushes. He was parare incendia, he was preparing fires. And he was obsidere loca, he was besieging places. So it's just a series of infinitives, and you just know from context, because there's no main verb, that they must be historical. So these are just things that Catiline was doing over and over again, which means they are in the infinitive in a list. And this isn't the most common use of the infinitive. It doesn't show up that much in Latin, but Sallust really likes to use it, and because right now we're reading about Catiline and we are reading a text of Sallust, you'll see it often in the texts that we're looking at. So it's good to be aware of. Alright, so next we have the ablative of respect. So this isn't a really difficult concept, it's just another use of the ablative that you will see. So we already saw it in our 5A2 passage that we read over the weekend. So we had learned in Latin and Greek letters. Here, just Latin letters. So she is learned, docta. So docta is agreeing with Sempronia in the nominative. And then you have literis latinis in the ablative. So learned with respect to Latin letters. Or you could use by means of. It's very similar to means or manner. It's just a little bit more awkward. So you can use with respect to or in Latin letters. Same thing down here. So fortunata is nominative, agreeing with Sempronia again. So fortunate, fortunate in respect to or in birth, genera, et, and forma. So fortunate in birth and beauty. So that's the ablative of respect. Nothing complicated or new really, just something to be aware of. Alright, so the last thing for grammar in this chapter is just a review of what qui can do. So if you have qui, meaning who or what, plus an indicative, you have a relative clause. We've been using those the whole time. That's not anything complicated. So qui plus the indicative, relative clause. You've seen many of those by now. Hopefully you're feeling confident in them. If not, please ask questions. But you can also have qui plus the subjunctive, which we've seen more recently, and that can do a couple different things. So first thing it can do is it can set up purpose with a verb of motion. So if I send someone to do something, or some people go to do something plus the subjunctive, they're going for a purpose, or I'm sending them for a purpose. You can still translate qui as who, but just know it has some sort of purpose behind it. It can also set up characteristic. So we've talked about the relative clause of characteristic. They are the sorts of men who would do this. They're not necessarily doing it right now, but with the subjunctive, they are the type who would, So that's another use of the subjunctive. It can also be causal. These men did this thing, these men who were evil. So they did it because they were evil, so therefore it's kind of a causal sense. It's a because with the subjunctive. So that's another option. It could be in indirect speech. Remember, when you go into indirect speech, all of your verbs that are not the main verb just automatically become subjunctive. So if you have a relative clause in indirect speech, it has to be subjunctive no matter what. So that's an option. Doesn't change the meaning at all, but it would be in the subjunctive. And lastly, you could have a concessive clause with qui plus the subjunctive. So they ran the race, those who had never run before. So there it's kind of concessive. Although they had never run before, they ran the race. So those are some different options. You can always just translate it as who or what and the verb, but it has some different kind of flavors that you can put the sentence into. So some additional options for you to think about. Okay, so your homework for this week is, as it says in the assignment, to do a couple of the exercises from this chapter, but also to go back through 5A2 and look at the infinitives and what they're doing in context. But because most of this chapter is kind of review, I'm going to spend the next few minutes talking about some additional things with the gerundive that I didn't get to in my video last week. So, brace yourselves. Alright, so additional gerundive things that I want to talk about. So we have some words in English that actually come from the gerundive, which is very cool. So my personal favorite, agenda, comes from Latin ago, agere, to do or drive, lead, something along those lines. So agenda is neuter plural, and it means things going to be done or things needing to be done. So that's where you get like your agenda that you carry around with you is just neuter plural things that you are going to do at some point in the future. So going to be done. Amanda, the name, is feminine singular with that A, and it comes from Latin amo, which we see all the time, meaning to love. So Amanda is a person going to be loved. Here, a feminine person going to be loved or needing to be loved. And lastly, we get Miranda, also a name, should be capitalized there, and that comes from miror, which we've also seen, meaning to wonder at or admire. So it's another feminine name, so she going to be admired or needing to be admired or wondered at. So those are all kind of nice examples that you see every day but don't really think about as coming from Latin gerundives. So hopefully that will help you kind of remember how the gerundive works. Next, I will show you my personal favorite example of a series of gerundives. Okay, so first of all, we've talked a little bit already about how much I enjoy Julius Caesar's writing. Maybe a terrible guy in general, bad policies, ended up being stabbed, you know, the usual, but his writing style is just really, really spectacular. So in this case, he is writing the Gallic Wars, which are a series of military reports that he sends back to Rome to prove what a good job he's doing in Gaul. So here he's talking specifically about an instance where an enemy is coming unexpectedly, and the only one who can do everything all at once is Caesar himself, so he has to step in and take action. So he gives just a list of really long things he has to accomplish, and he does them all in the gerundive. So let's take a look. Alright, so first we have omnia agenda. As we just saw, agenda means things needing to be done, and omnia, of course, means all. So everything needing to be done, or going to be done in the future, but probably necessity here. So all things needing to be done, aka by Caesar himself. Vexillum propendum. So the vexillum is the military standard that they would carry when they went out into battle, and propendum means to put forth. So the military standard must be put forth. Signum tuba dandum. So signum, very similar to our English word signal, and it just means military signal. Dandum comes from do dare, you know that one, means to give. So the signal must be given. And then tuba, such a great word. It means military trumpet, but of course it's where we get the word tuba. So the signal must be given by the tuba, aka the military trumpet. Revocandi milites. The milites, the soldiers, must be revoke being called back. So the soldiers must be called back from the work they were doing in the fields, digging trenches, whatever. Acies instruenda. So acies is a battle line, and instruenda means to draw up. So the battle line must be drawn up, aka again by Caesar. Milites cohortandi, so the soldiers again must be cohortor, means to encourage. So the soldiers must be encouraged. He has to give this rousing military speech before they can fight. And lastly, signum dandum. So as though that weren't enough, he again needs to give this signal that they go out into battle. So just a really exciting set of gerundives all in a row. And that's a complete sentence. I left out some of the qui clauses in the middle, but that's all of the verbs in the sentence. It's just a bunch of gerundives. So really the best use of gerundives ever. All right, so I hope you all have a good week. Let me know if you have any questions about the homework or infinitives, and I will see you all soon. Have a good one.